Today, the lands I will talk about are places that have witnessed human history for millennia, filled with blood, faith, and hope. This land is not only geographically significant, it is a living history book carrying the desires, fears, and beliefs of countless generations. Here, the roots of three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, intertwine. Every temple and place of worship is not only sacred, but also a witness to centuries of conflicts, misunderstandings, and attempts at peace. Empires have risen and fallen on this land. Roman legions marched here, Byzantine cities rose, Umayyads and Abbasids established centers of knowledge and culture, and the Ottomans ruled for centuries. Every ruler's mark, every campaign, is etched into the memory of this land. From Jerusalem to Gaza, from the West Bank to every corner of Palestine, every stone, every street tells its story. Once trade caravans passed through here, markets teemed with people, children played, families celebrated, and prayers filled the air. Yet at the same time, war, displacement, and loss were always close by. But despite all this rich history, the question remains, why has this land still never known peace? Why has blood and faith combined over millennia to both create and destroy? Why does this land, for thousands of years, continue to teach humanity lessons, both sacred and painful? Let us together follow the trail of this question, examining the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the attempts at peace, the tragedies, and the hopes. This is not just about politics. It is the history of humanity, lost childhoods, defeats, dreams, and pages of the future yet to be written. A holy land, yet soaked in blood. Jerusalem, the cradle of three divine religions. For Christians, it is the sacred city. For Jews, the promised land. And for Muslims, the site of the Al-Aqsa miracle. Yet, on this land, the sound of prayers is often drowned out by the roar of bombs. Amid children's screams, the wailing of sirens, and the dust of crumbling walls, one question remains unanswered. Why has this land never known peace? Millennia have passed, peace talks were held, steps were taken for reconciliation, and world leaders signed decrees. Yet every time, the result is the same: blood, hatred, and shattered hopes. Today, we attempt to view this question through our own lens: Israel and Palestine, the eternal sorrow of the Holy Land. Ancient roots, the early Israelites, Palestine, and the divine promise. The story of this land does not begin in recent centuries. It stretches back millennia. Legend has it that the Creator promised this land to the prophet Abraham and his descendants, the Promised Land. Thus, the ancient Jewish people considered themselves God's chosen and this land their eternal inheritance. Later, prophets David and Solomon ruled here, making Jerusalem their capital and the temple, the house of God, the heart of their faith. This era represented the pinnacle of their rise. But, as with all creations, even this peak met its downfall. In the 6th century BCE, Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem, razed the temple, and exiled its people. Subsequently, the land fell under the rule of Persians, Greeks, and eventually the Roman Empire. The Romans brutally suppressed Jewish uprisings. In 70 CE, Jerusalem was captured again and utterly destroyed, beginning a long, painful diaspora for the Jewish people, scattering them across the globe. Over time, new peoples emerged in the region. During Roman rule, the land was named Palestine, after the ancient Philistines. Later, it became part of the Byzantine Empire, the Arab Caliphate, the Seljuk, and Ottoman empires. Through the centuries, Muslims, Christians, and Jews often lived side by side, sometimes peacefully, sometimes under tension. Perhaps, for some, the divine promise of this land became a source of power, leading to countless wars to claim it. It is notable that the Jewish people, once dispersed across the world from this land, today challenge all of humanity to reclaim these territories from the Palestinians. Renowned for their wealth, They seek the lands once ruled by David and Solomon. Yet they fail to realize that in Solomon's time, even a single ant was protected from harm, whereas now, these lands are governed by humans who lack both mercy and foresight. The Middle Ages and the Holy Wars. Following the rise of Islam in the 7th century, Arab armies began conquering the Near East. By 636, Jerusalem was under Muslim rule. During the Caliphate, the city became a center of peace and faith, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted. But this tranquility did not last. By the late 11th century, European kingdoms and the Church called out, Deus voce, God wills it. Thus began the Crusades, a series of wars disguised as holy endeavors but driven by political and religious conquest. In 1099, the first Crusaders besieged and captured Jerusalem. Behind this victory lay streets washed in blood and thousands of murders. Chroniclers recorded, in the streets of Jerusalem, horses waded knee-deep in human blood. Some claimed this was divine will. For many, it marked one of humanity's darkest chapters. In subsequent centuries, Muslims reclaimed Jerusalem multiple times, with Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi in 1187 defeating the Crusaders and restoring the city to the Islamic realm. Yet peace remained elusive, as this land continued to blaze in the hearts of three faiths. The Crusades, though fought over Jerusalem, reflected Europe's greatest human tragedies in the name of God. Millions dead, cities burned, and sanctity stained with blood. Thus, by the end of the Middle Ages, this land had become a symbol not of peace, but of faith and power struggles, sometimes in the name of justice, sometimes for greed and domination. A new era, Ottoman rule and the calm before the storm. In 1517, Jerusalem became part of the Ottoman Empire, entering a new era. For nearly 400 years, the land remained under the Sultan's rule. During Ottoman governance, Jerusalem and Palestine were relatively peaceful. Religious minorities were protected. Temples and churches remained open. For the first time in centuries, diverse faiths coexisted and breathed together on the same soil. Yet this calm would not last. By the mid-19th century, winds of change swept through Europe. Empires faltered and nationalism surged. Simultaneously, anti-Semitism rose across Europe. Jews faced massacres, insults, and the loss of basic rights. From this oppression emerged a revolutionary idea, Zionism. Its core principle was simple yet radical. The Jews must return to their ancient homeland, Palestine. Austrian journalist Theodor Herzl became one of its pioneers. In 1896, he published Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, arguing that only through their own state could Jews escape centuries of persecution or dominate Jerusalem as a power. A year later, the First Zionist Congress convened in Basel, Switzerland, declaring, "We will establish a national homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine." What began as an idea would, decades later, shape the fate of millions and unleash a historical storm. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire was weakening. Zionist organizations began purchasing land and organizing migration from Europe to Palestine. Palestinian Arabs watched with unease, unaware that this migration would one day ignite a great conflagration. The calm endured, but beneath every calm, a storm sleeps. By the start of the 20th century, with the fall of empires and the onset of wars, that storm was approaching. The early 20th century, Britain, the Balfour Declaration, and the seeds of conflict. World War I dismantled the Ottoman Empire. As the map was redrawn, Palestine came under British control. During this period, a world-altering document was signed, the 1917 Balfour Declaration. British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote, "His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people." One sentence, yet it sowed the seeds of conflict lasting over a century. Britain had also promised Arabs independence if they opposed the Ottomans in the war. Thus, the same land was promised to two peoples, a dual promise that history would remember. Following the declaration, Jewish migration from Europe to Palestine accelerated. New settlements and communities emerged. Lands were purchased, and Palestinians gradually were displaced. Initially seen as mere migration, this movement eventually laid the roots of ethnic and religious conflict. By the 1920s and 1930s, Palestine was boiling. Britain, ostensibly a peacekeeper, often manipulated both sides against each other. Neighbors became enemies. Once sharing markets and water sources now bred suspicion and fear. In 1936, the Arab Revolt erupted as Palestinians rose to protect their land, identity, and voice. Britain crushed the uprising mercilessly. Thousands killed, hundreds of villages destroyed. Yet this was only the beginning. World War II approached, bringing with it the Holocaust, which would reshape the Palestine issue entirely. The fate, power, and historical significance of Israel and Palestine were extraordinary. Yet, the land's wealth and strategic importance turned into human pride and greed. Their wrong decisions, wars over territory, were not just about land and power. They echoed the collapse of moral integrity. Palestine, however, struggled to protect its land, rights, and spirit of unity. In the end, both sides suffered great losses, cities were destroyed, hopes were dashed. But this struggle was not merely about territory. It was a test of justice, unity, and the power of law. Yet the story was far from over. These wrong decisions did not end with war alone. Their traces shook the entire region. In Part 2, we will explore what happened from 1948 to the present. Nakba, the wars of 1967 and 1973, intifadas, blockades, and the stories of children growing up behind walls. Get ready, because this is not just the story of conflict, but the story of people carrying the weight of millennia. The storm has already arrived, a period where history, blood, and hope are intertwined. Intifadas, stones and street protests, peace attempts, blockades. Life in Gaza and the West Bank continues every day amid danger and fear. Children grow up behind walls, their play interrupted by wailing sirens and explosions. Jerusalem, the sacred city of three great religions, both paradise and a testing ground. Here, religion, politics, and history are intertwined, and every stone, every street is filled with lessons for humanity. And the question still remains, why has peace still not been possible? Both sides carry fear, loss, and anger. Yet hope still survives. If children can play, the voice of peace can still be heard. Get ready. Part 2 will take you through the painful, struggling, and hope-filled story from the Nakba to the present day. 1948, the birth of Israel, the partition of Palestine. World War II shook humanity to its core. The Holocaust claimed 6 million Jewish lives and left deep scars across Europe. As the world wrestled with guilt, the burden seemed to fall upon Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan, partition Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, with Jerusalem under international control. Jewish leaders accepted, Arabs rejected it, deeming the division unjust. 56% of the land was allocated to the Jewish state, though 65 to 70% of the population were Arabs. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of Israel and Jerusalem. The very next day, armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq attacked Israel. Independence and war began simultaneously. For Israel, it was the war of independence. For Palestinians, Nakba, the catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands were forced from their homes. Villages burned, cities emptied. Some fled to neighboring countries. Others lived in deserts or tents. For these people, exile became not just a status, but a hereditary pain. In 1949, a ceasefire was declared, but a divided land, a wounded people, an enduring enmity remained. Israel had established a state. Palestine was erased from the map. Gaza and the West Bank came under temporary Egyptian and Jordanian control. But for Palestinians, neither freedom nor peace had arrived. They were strangers in their own land. The Jewish people, once dispersed from the Roman Empire's oppression, had suffered the tragedy of losing millions under fascist rule in 1933. Yet today, they themselves inflict similar brutality on the Palestinian people, repeating the cycle of historical suffering. 1967 and 1973, short wars, long wounds. 20 years had passed since the Nakba, yet the wounds had not healed. Palestinian refugees still lived in tents, breathing in hope of returning to their lands. Tensions at the borders continued to rise. In June 1967, that tension erupted into a war that would redraw the map of the Middle East, the Six-Day War. Israel launched rapid attacks against the forces of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. 6 days later, the outcome was clear. Israel had occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. Jerusalem was now entirely under Israeli control. For the Muslim world, this was a deep shock. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, Islam's third holiest site, was under Israeli control. The Western Wall, sacred to Jews, was now in their hands. A city of two peoples, two faiths, two histories. Yet only one reality prevailed: occupation. The Six-Day War opened the door to decades of hatred. UN Resolution 242 called on Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories, but the call went unanswered. The Arab world could not forget this blow. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for Jews, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack. A short but intense war ensued. Initially, Arab forces made some gains, but Israel eventually regained the upper hand. Although militarily inconclusive, the Yom Kippur War marked a turning point diplomatically. After this, the United States became Israel's key ally in the region, while the Arab world remained fragmented. One side declared Jerusalem the eternal capital, while millions of Palestinians lived as temporary refugees. The wars were short, but their wounds remain unhealed. Peace efforts and broken hopes. By the late 20th century, the world was filled with hope. In the 1980s and 1990s, Israeli and Palestinian leaders sat at negotiation tables. The First Intifada, which began in 1987, stones and street protests, drew global attention to Palestine. In 1993, the Oslo peace process commenced. Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat shook hands. Once enemies, they sat together at a table for peace and hope. The Camp David talks further raised expectations. Yet these peace agreements were never fully realized. Land restitution was slow, Israeli security concerns increased, and for Palestinians, hope gradually faded. From 1990 to 2000, the Second Intifada erupted. Israel's harsh responses, bombings, and security barriers made life in Gaza and the West Bank even more difficult. During this period, Hamas began to rise. The Gaza Strip came under blockade by Israel. Life became dangerous for both sides, and the future appeared dark. Thus, the eternal cycle of this centuries-old conflict continues. Peace is sometimes hoped for at the table, yet in the streets, villages, and refugee camps, real life is filled with war and displacement. This conflict is not just political. It is a human tragedy, a story of lost hopes, fears, suffering, and pain. Today, children behind walls. Today, the Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Children are born and grow up here, living amid war, siege, and deprivation before their feet even fully touch the ground. Their playgrounds are streets torn by explosions, their laughter cut short by sirens. It is no different in Israel. There, too, children grow up to the sound of sirens. Shelters become their second homes. Every moment brings an attack. Every moment brings news. And this fear shapes the lives of both Jewish and Palestinian children into shapeless memories. The world reacts in divided ways. Some prioritize Israel's security. Others see the lost childhood of Palestinian children. Words and news fill media screens. Diplomatic protocols are signed. Yet the reality, bleeding wounds, empty homes, tents, and empty bowls, is never fully visible. For these children, politics is not an abstract expectation, but the daily reality of pain, fear, and hope. Every day brings a siren, a bomb, a poverty, a loss. And every day brings hope from the world. Perhaps today will be different. Under the echoes of a millennia-old conflict, Jerusalem, Gaza, the West Bank, and refugee camps, seen through the eyes of children, teach the heaviest lessons of history, religion, and the concept of God in this land. For millennia, Jerusalem has been sacred to three divine religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As we ask why peoples who believe in the same God fight one another, the answer lies not only in history, but in the human heart. Religion has not always been only faith. At times, it has served as a political instrument. Struggles over land, borders, and power have often been fought under a holy cloak. This is a dangerous intersection of faith and politics, where belief is claimed as divine right, and political goals are legitimized in God's name. Jerusalem is both a symbol of paradise and a trial for humanity. The prayers and stones, temples built and homes destroyed, are steeped in millennia of hope and hatred. Every wall, street, and stone carries lessons of history, faith, and humanity. And these lessons are not only for Palestinians or Jews. They are reminders for the entire world. When faith mixes with self-interest, peace becomes distant. Seeds of hatred and revenge grow in every generation. Jerusalem has been both paradise and trial for millennia. And this paradox continues. Philosophical and human perspective. When will peace be possible? Centuries of war, conflict, and violence are etched into every stone and street of this land. Yet the question remains, when will peace be possible? Who must change more for reconciliation? Fear and suspicion in Israel, pain and loss in Palestine. Both sides carry their rightful anger and historical memory. An unjust peace is merely a pile of words. If the land is not returned, if injustice is not corrected, peace is false, incomplete, and dangerous. One land, three religions, one God. Yet why not one heart? Perhaps the lesson humanity must learn is this. Faith should live not only in prayers, but in mutual respect and understanding. Every destroyed home, lost childhood, spilled blood, reminds the world. As sins increase, the Antichrist smiles. Yet hope remains. If children can play, hear the voice of peace, and people listen to each other, this land can be both sacred and full of peace. Jerusalem, Gaza, Palestine carry the weight of history. But humanity's choice remains: succumb to hatred or move forward with hope. Conclusion: the silent prayer of the Holy Land. Millennia of wars, defeats, hopes, and tragedies. Amid all this blood and tears, the land prays silently. Every heart, carrying a different faith and history, beats to the same prayer. Silence, tomorrow, hope. Perhaps God watches the tears of the last child yearning for peace in this land. And even amidst sirens, bombs, and waves of hatred, one day the sound of peace will be heard. Jerusalem, Gaza, and Palestine, both sacred, wounded, and full of hope. History is written here, but the future still lies in humanity's hands.